All right, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So I want to take some time to talk about the story I keep seeing about the judge that reprimanded the teenager for falling asleep during a field trip. So first I want to read the article and then we'll talk. Teen handcuffed after sleeping in Detroit court, tired due to no permanent home, mom says. The mother of a teenage girl recently handcuffed and threatened with jail by a Detroit judge, frustrated with her sleeping and showing him attitude, explained why her daughter was likely tired this week. Latoria Till told the Free Press in a phone interview Thursday that her family currently does not have a permanent place to stay. And after what happened in the courtroom of 36th District Judge Kenneth King, 15-year-old Eva Goodman is afraid. My daughter is hurt. She is feeling scared. She didn't want to go to work. She feels like as if her peers went against her. She was real nervous and intimidated, Till said. We have to bounce around currently because we don't have a permanent address. And so that particular night, we got in kind of late. And usually when she goes to work, she's up and planting trees or being active. Goodman works with the Greening Project, a nonprofit that aims to improve the green infrastructure of the city. A statement from the nonprofit Wednesday incorrectly identified Goodman as 16. On Tuesday, Goodman appears with the project attending King's courtroom to both watch proceedings and learn from the judge. While speaking to the teens, King noticed Goodman sleeping. Video of King's courtroom showed he yelled at her to wake up, but minutes later saw her sleeping again. At that point, he ordered her taken into custody. Till said her daughter acknowledged sleeping, but did not understand the gravity of the situation. She's never been in a courtroom before, and she's never been in trouble before, Till explained. After court staff led Goodman out of the room, Till said they told her daughter to undress and put on a green gel jumpsuit. Till said her daughter refused to take off certain clothing items, but was given the opportunity to change in an empty room. While there was no staff present in the room observing the minor changing, Till said her daughter believes there was a security camera. After she changed, Goodman was handcuffed. Video shows she remained out of King's courtroom for roughly 2 hours before he brought her back. At that point, he held a hearing, asking a defense lawyer to help her before berating her for sleeping and threatening her with jail time. Ultimately, King allowed Goodman to leave, but not before asking her peers for a show of hands to decide if she needed to spend time in jail. King told the Free Press on Wednesday he thought he acted appropriately. I wasn't trying to punish the young lady. What I was trying to do, I was trying to serve as a deterrence, King said in a phone interview Wednesday afternoon. I wanted to instill in this kid that this is not a joke. This is a very serious situation. But Till said her daughter did not need a lesson. She's a kind, smart, funny, athletic teen. King basically was being a bully to the child that was sleeping and unaware of the etiquette of a courtroom because she's never been there. She's never been in trouble, Till said. She's not a problem child. Till said he reviewed some of the video encounter. The court removed the video from YouTube on Wednesday afternoon and said she did not see her daughter become loud or rude with the judge. King told the Free Press he felt disrespected mainly by her body language. Marissa Eberso-Wood, chairperson of the Greening of Detroit, blasted King for his conduct. Although the judge was trying to teach a lesson of respect, his methods were unacceptable. The group of students should have been simply asked to leave the courtroom if he thought they were disrespectful, she said in a statement provided Wednesday by a public relations specialist. Till said she and her daughter are still processing everything that happened. They're also meeting with a lawyer. So one, spirit of way too much because it was never this deep, right? It should have never even escalated to this point of anything to the point where I'm making a video about it because it made the news. Spirit of way too much. And really, I think the conversation is all about ego, and I'm speaking specifically about the judge. Because I feel that a lot of times as adults, when we move and let ego dictate how we're going to move in certain situations, a lot of times that's when things fall apart because logic has left the conversation. And so when you're looking at the logistics of this is a group of teenagers that are a part of a program that are there voluntarily. These are not teenagers that have committed any crimes. This is not a young lady who has robbed the bank and led the police on a speed chase all up and down I-5 and a few cars blew up and a helicopter had to fly and then they jumped out the car and ran and climbed a wall and held 10 babies hostage and finally got detained. Nothing like that. Nothing of the sort, right? And so the question becomes, why would you move in such a way that is so volatile just because you don't like the fact that some kid fell asleep? And when we're talking about ego, I want to go to this clip really quick.
I spoke to Judge Kenneth King. He stands by what he did, placing a 16-year-old in handcuffs after she was allegedly misbehaving on a field trip in his courtroom.
You fall asleep in my courtroom one more time and put you in the back, understood?
Judge King had her removed from the courtroom, but he told me that didn't fix her, quote, attitude. And that's when he pulled out the jail uniform and handcuffs.
That's not something that normally happens. But I felt compelled to do it because I didn't like the child's attitude.
King says he was trying to teach the teenager a lesson on behavior and respect in court.
I haven't been disrespected like that in a very long time.
He then threatened the girl with jail time.
I'm going to go to sleep tonight while you're sitting in the juvenile detention facility.
Was I really going to do that? Probably not. Could I have? Probably so. but that's not what I want to do to a kid who's there on a field trip.
The nonprofit running the field trip tells me in a statement, quote, although the judge was trying to teach a lesson of respect, his methods were unacceptable. The young lady was traumatized by the judge's unnecessary disciplinary treatment and scolding. The judge standing by his methods, though, saying it was all just to help children from being in his courtroom later in life.
So that was my own version of scared straight.
So I want you to focus on the part where he keeps talking about he didn't like her attitude. That was the main part that had him triggered. This goes back to that conversation of ego, because in reality, because she is there as a visitor on a field trip, she is not on the docket. There are not charges being read to her about something she's done. She is there with a group of teens. That means she has agency to feel however she wants to feel. So if she is not really enjoying her trip, or she has an attitude, or maybe she's rolling her eyes, or maybe they're having a conversation and she's only giving one or two responses, she has the agency to do so because she's done nothing wrong. And at the end of the day, if you felt some kind of way at that point, you could have just had her sit out of the courtroom and sit on the bench in the hall, because every courtroom got that bench in the hallway. She could sit on the bench, take a nap, and do whatever she does, and she'll just miss out on whatever it was you were sharing with the group. So be it. You cut your losses and keep it moving. And it could have ended there. But no, again, that ego kicks in. He doesn't like the way that she's making him feel by her utilizing her agency to have an attitude because you woke her up and embarrassed her in front of everybody. So now instead of that, you want to throw the hammer. And this is why sometimes it's like, is it really this deep? And when I think of the years that I work with kids, sometimes my teenagers, sometimes they would do a lot. And you know what? I would be like, you know what? All right, we're going to regroup here. Sometimes I feel like, how about this? You just come back tomorrow and we'll start over. Because the thing is, sometimes they're having their moments, they're having their worst day. And when they come back tomorrow, whatever happened on Tuesday, we're not bringing it into Wednesday. It's a great day. Hey, how was school? Right? Because I'm not going to sit here and hold grudges on kids. Because as an adult, I should not expect a teenager to move in the way that adults move. They may think they're grown, they may think they're adults, but that brain is still wired to move like a teenager. So I can't hold a teenager to the standard of an adult and punish them when they behave like teenagers, because that's what they're gonna do, right? And so rather than him just cutting the losses and letting it be, oh no, he has to throw the hammer. So instead, now he's gonna make the girl put on some jail clothes, right? He's gonna cuff the girl. Then he's gonna have a hearing about the girl and her attitude, right? And then, he threatens her with jail time, all because she got an attitude. And then to make it even worse, then you dig in and you're like, let's bring the peers into it and make the peers, by a show of hands, should I let her go? You don't know if she even gets along with her peers. How do you know if she's the odd one out in that group? How do you know that the other teenagers in that group are like, oh, this is the perfect time to get her? What was going to happen if the teenager said, no, throw the book at her? Were you going to lock her up and have her stay the night? Like, these are questions that I just have, right? Absolutely crazy. And so again, like I said, this was a field trip. A field trip. These are not kids that have done anything. But you want to sit here and create an environment where you make them prone to be criminals because you don't like how they're moving, because you feel like within your respective position of what you do, they should look to you within this high regard. Listen, if they're not feeling the field trip, they're not feeling the field trip. That's out of the scope of your work at this point. There's nothing you can do about it because teenagers are going to feel how they feel. And again, I'm sorry, sometimes the courtroom is boring. Right? I've been in the court many, many times, especially having to go and take some teenagers that, they done got in trouble and I'm in there trying to save their lives, right? And sometimes when you have to go, and it's one of those situations where it's like 50 people on a docket and, maybe the person you're there to support is number 29. You got to sit through everybody. You got to sit through all the people in their charges, and there's going to be a stay here with this attorney, and then this attorney runs up here. It can be the longest day. And sometimes I'm looking at my team like, you know what? When you get out of this, when you get home, you stay in the house. Don't go outside. Is closed. As a matter of fact, when you get home, close the blinds. I don't even want you looking at the sun. You get acquainted with Encyclopedia Britannica, all the editions, because you don't know how to act. Stay in the house, because I'm not doing this again. Now, got me in here for 5 hours and we ain't had no lunch, right? So yeah, the courtroom can be kind of boring. I think back to, God, that first time I had jury duty, I was actually excited, right? I thought it was going to be one of those really crazy cases like what you see in the movies where, I don't know, something happened and then the mistress, opens the back door and storms in, and it's the mistress nobody knew about, and it was going to be all these I was ready. No. My trial was a civil case. Some man was suing his former employer because he didn't get his bonus. Mind you, his bonus was 4 times my salary I was making at the time working with the kids. So here I am for a week and a half with an attitude like, why am I in here with this rich man, his problems? And I ain't even got enough money to fix the timing belt on my car right now. Are y'all for real? But no, listen, sometimes these trips are boring. And I'm saying that as an adult that's worked with kids. Sometimes we go into places and I'm like, oh my God, why did they have us come to this? Like, you know, because sometimes the company would say, you got to go to this, you got to go to that. And these would be some of the most nursing home trips. As a matter of fact, I would have rather gone to the nursing home because at least the senior citizens are happy to get a visitor. We would have had a good time once we bring out the checkers. But, you know, sometimes these trips are boring. I remember we took the kids, we had to do something with Capital One Bank. And mind you, these were like 10 and 11-year-olds. And then the people that were doing the presentation have never really talked or worked with kids before. And they're like 19, 20 years old. And they're up here talking about derivatives. I was like, Lord, sometimes I was almost falling asleep. So I understand why a teenager might nod off in a courtroom. It's not the most exciting place to be, right? And then it makes me wonder about the staff that was with the group of teens. Like, nobody stepped in and was like, this is a lot. Because I just know if it were my teens, I would have been like, wait a minute, Judge, hold on. It doesn't need to turn into all of this. Because I would have just took my group and we would just leave. Like, if it's going to be all that, we can go. Because at the end of the day, I could see if the young lady was disruptive and doing a whole lot, but she was just asleep. At least she was quiet. You know, the biggest hoopla that a lot of groups deal with when they're taking teen places, the teens don't know how to sit down and be quiet, right? They're doing every and anything under the sun. And I think what the judge would have also needed to understand is when we're talking about the conversation of attitude in teenagers, once you embarrass a teenager in front of everybody, they're done. They shut down. You have no more leverage with them. So you don't have to worry about getting anything else out of them because you've lost them for the day. I always think back to, I had a teenager once who really, really loved to sing, right? So I was able to pull some strings and get her into this opportunity where she would have had a chance to perform at one of the jazz festivals in Baltimore. And she was going to do this with the students from the Duke Ellington School of Music and a few other groups in the DC area that, you know, all these cool choirs. And so I pulled some strings, was able to get her into the rehearsal, right? So I didn't stay at the rehearsal, but, you know, I dropped her off. And the only rule that was really there was the creative director of the show was just like, they just have to rehearse the same way they're going to perform. He wanted them to give 110% no matter what, every single time they practice the songs, all of that, right? And so at some point in this rehearsal, she kind of started falling off a little bit. You know, you lose interest in everything. So the director of the show was like, okay, you know what? I want you to sit out for about 10 minutes, and when you're ready to rejoin us and you feel like you're back into, you know, your space, come on back and join us. But oh no, she ain't like the way the director said that to her, so she just shut down. And so she chose to just sit out the rest of the rehearsal, sat there for the next 2 hours, right, on her phone. And this is like 2011, so I don't even feel like teenagers really had smartphones yet. Like, smartphones were out, but parents weren't buying their kids iPhones. So she probably had like a cheaper phone, so she probably was sitting there playing Snake for the next 2 hours, right? So when I come to, you know, pick her up, and I'm like, how did it go? And the director's like, she won't be in the show. And I'm like, well, what happened? So when they explain everything, I'm like, what? So now I'm in the car, and, you know, we're taking the girl back, and I'm like, well, why didn't you rejoin the group? I don't like the way they talk to me. Okay, so I get that, but you wanted to really do this show, so you just said that was it. Yeah, nobody gonna talk to me like that. Okay, so you just sat there for 2 hours. Okay, look, you ain't gotta worry about me taking you to nothing else. Look, next time you wanna sing, you gonna have to and sing around the house, cause I ain't taking you to nothing else. Like, but that's just how teenagers are. It's just the way they're wired, right? And I do question, because I wonder, if this was a white girl, would he have responded the same way? And I say that because a lot of times when it comes to black youth, people love to throw the hammer at black youth right away. They always assume the worst. You know, they always want to throw, you know, just punitive everything. You know, I think of all the times where someone is asked, oh, can I come and speak to your teens, or can I come speak to your kids? And I always have to have a whole vetting process, because a lot of times they assume that all of your teenagers are troubled. They assume that they're all going to be drug dealers, that all the girls are going to be pregnant by 13 and a half, that none of them are going to graduate, that they all want to sell drugs, none want to go to college, they're all going to be criminals, they're going to steal. Like, that's the assumption that they have. So then when you see whatever program or curriculum they have, it's always something where you swear, I'm like, I am not working with axe murderers here. I have inquisitive teenagers that are inquisitive about life. So if you want to come and do a presentation with them, sure. But this is not going to be something where you come and yell at them for 2 hours about how they need to get their life together, because they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, because they're here with me. You know, they could be out running the streets all day, but they're here with me. So, you know, that's kind of what I've seen. But when we're talking just about even with schooling, right, we've seen the numbers of how black youth are overrepresented in suspensions. I'm going to pull up some of the numbers here, right? When we're talking about, you know, students suspended from school compared to the student population, right? When you're talking about just the percentage of all students, black students overrepresented in suspensions, right? 23.2%. You know, when we're just talking about out-of-school suspension, black students overrepresented again. In-school suspension, black students overrepresented 16.4%. Referral to law enforcement, black students overrepresented 10.4%. Expulsion, black students again overrepresented 14.6%. Corporal punishment, black students overrepresented again 22.1%. School-related arrests, black students again overrepresented 19.4%. right? Even when we talk about the different kind of schools, whether it be public or traditional or anything like that, traditional schools, black students, again, overrepresented, 21.9%. Magnet schools, black students overrepresented, 28.2%. Charter schools, black students overrepresented at a high rate of 31.6%. And there's a conversation about that when we're talking about, a lot of charter schools always wanting to kind of flesh out kids so they can keep their numbers right in regard to reporting and what comes in with funding. Another conversation for another day. Alternative schools, black students, again, overrepresented, 11.4%. Even in special education, black students, again, overrepresented, 19.1%. And then even when we're talking about the poverty rates within the different kind of schools that have a 0 to 25% poverty rate, black students overrepresented again, 12.2%. 26 to 49% poverty rate, black students overrepresented again, 14.0%. Black students, or again, schools where it's 50 to 74% poverty rate, black students overrepresented again, 19.5%. Schools with a poverty rate of 75 to 100%. Again, black students overrepresented, 24.6%. Again, I want y'all to look at that again. 24.6% in a school that has a 75 to 100% poverty rate. And then let's go back to that conversation of the charter schools, which again, that's not normally not the conversation about a charter school, but again, look at how high it is at the charter school, 31.6%. Again, it goes back to that conversation I was having about flushing out, right? And then even when we're just talking about suspensions, right? When you're talking about black girls, overrepresented, 6 times more likely to be suspended than a white girl. And one thing I want you to understand, that even with those statistics, it just highlights the fact that a lot of times you have students that are overrepresented when it comes to suspension, not because they've done more offenses than another student, but more so because when it comes to the conversation of race, things are interpreted differently, where a lot of times white staff and even black staff look at black students differently, and a lot of times black students are punished more often for the exact same offense as white counterparts and other students from different racial demographics. But that's something that's always taken place in our schools. And even when we talk about the adultification of black youth, and specifically black girls, right? Let's go to some additional research. Now, this was coming out of a study from Georgetown University. Across all age ranges, participants viewed black girls collectively as more adult than white girls. Responses revealed in particular that participants perceived black girls as needing less protection and nurturing than white girls, and that black girls were perceived to know more about adult topics and are more knowledgeable about sex than their white peers. The most significant differences were found in age brackets that encompass mid-childhood and early adolescence, ages 5 to 9 and 10 to 14, and continue to a lesser degree in the 15 to 19-year-old age bracket. No statistically significant differences were found in the age group 0 to 4. That is, beginning as early as 5 years of age, black girls were more likely to be viewed as behaving and seeming older than their stated age, more knowledgeable about adult topics including sex, and more likely to take on adult roles and responsibilities than what would have been expected for their age. Significance. These results suggest that black girls are viewed as more adult than their white peers at almost all stages of childhood, beginning most significantly at the age of 5, peaking during the ages of 10 to 14, and continuing during the ages of 15 to 19. In essence, adults appear to place distinct views and expectations on black girls that characterize them as developmentally older than white peers. Adults appear to place distinct views and expectations on black girls that characterize them as developmentally older than their white peers, especially in mid-childhood and early adolescence, critical periods for healthy identity development. The significance of this result lies in the potential for adultification to act as a contributing cause of the demonstrated harsher treatment of black girls when compared to white girls of the same age. Simply put, if authorities and public systems view black girls as less innocent, less needing of protection, and generally more like adults, it would appear likely that they would also view black girls as more culpable for their actions and, on that basis, punish them more harshly despite their status as children. Thus, adultification may serve as a contributing cause of the disproportionately in-school discipline outcomes, harsher treatment by law enforcement, and the differentiated exercise of discretion by officials across the spectrum of the juvenile justice system. So again, it does make me wonder that had this been a white girl, would the judge respond the same way? Or even if this was just a white youth, would the judge have that same response? And so it even gets worse, because then when you realize that you get the girl's backstory and, they're not really in a permanent place of living and it's, constantly bouncing from place to place to place, like you just never know people's experience. And this is why sometimes I think people have to get in the habit of not always being ready to just throw the hammer at youth when they're acting like youth. Right? Now, it's not to say that everybody automatically gets a slap on the wrist to just go and do Lord knows what and do whatever whenever they want to, but it's understanding that sometimes there's context behind why we interpret things that we interpret and why people move the way that they move, right? And so as far as updates, what I've seen is the judge has been removed from a few different assignments. I know he was doing some work at a university. That's kind of been yanked. The judge is stating that right now he's receiving death threats and, there's some other things happening. But I just think sometimes, you really have to cut your losses and really decipher, is it that deep? Was a teenage girl who was nodding off a few times while you were doing your presentation worth you cuffing the girl, putting her in jail uniforms, and then having a hearing and threatening to put her in jail, and then having the peers decide whether or not she should be let go after you've embarrassed her for 2 hours? Was it really that deep? Right? Questions that need answers. Anyway, for those who are interested in my conversations about working with youth, or my 11 years, I do have a podcast called Comedically Hard-Headed, and season 3 of that podcast is dedicated to my 11 years of working with youth. And right now we're, I think, in year number 3. So there's a lot of funny stories in that. So for people who are interested, you can check out that podcast. Some of those episodes are actually on this channel, but you can also go to the description on this video, and it has the links to all the streaming sites that it's available on. Anyway, that's all I have. I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.